What if I told you that the person who spent weeks searching for a missing hiker in the Arizona desert was actually the one who killed him? What if the victim's final photograph held a clue that wouldn't be understood until 3 years later, when another identical image would surface from the killer's own hand? This is the haunting true story of Justin Harlow, a case so twisted that even seasoned investigators struggled to piece together the dark truth hidden beneath the unforgiving Sonoran sun. March 15th, 2020. The world was changing rapidly as pandemic lockdowns began sweeping across America, but for Justin Harlow, the call of the wilderness remained stronger than any fear of an invisible virus. An experienced hiker with over a decade of desert exploration under his belt, Justin knew the Sonoran Desert like an old friend. Its hidden water sources, its treacherous terrain, and its breathtaking beauty that could shift from paradise to peril in moments. Justin had grown up in Phoenix, watching the urban sprawl gradually encroach upon the wild spaces he loved. As a teenager, he'd started hiking with his father, learning to read the subtle signs of the desert, how the behavior of birds could indicate water sources, which plants provided emergency sustenance, and how to navigate by the position of distinctive rock formations when GPS failed. By the time he reached his 30s, Justin had become something of a legend among local hiking enthusiasts, the guy who could find his way through unmarked terrain that left others hopelessly lost. His passion extended beyond personal adventure. Justin volunteered regularly with search and rescue operations, using his intimate knowledge of the desert to help locate missing hikers. He taught wilderness survival courses at the local community college and maintained a popular photography blog called Desert Dreams, where he shared both stunning landscape images and practical safety advice for fellow outdoor enthusiasts. Justin was the person everyone called when they were planning a challenging hike, remembered his colleague at the environmental consulting firm where he worked as a field biologist. He knew which trails were passable after storms, where the seasonal water sources were, and how to read weather patterns better than some meteorologists. The irony is heartbreaking. If anyone should have been able to survive whatever happened out there, it was Justin. That morning of March 15th, Justin had awakened before dawn, as was his custom for weekend hiking expeditions. He methodically packed his familiar gear: 4 liters of water, twice the recommended amount for his planned route, emergency shelter, first aid supplies, his GPS device with backup batteries, emergency beacon, and his professional-grade camera equipment. He'd planned a solo expedition to photograph the dramatic rock formations near the McDowell Mountain Regional Park, an area he'd explored dozens of times but never during storm season. Justin's girlfriend, Lisa Rodriguez, had expressed concern about him hiking alone during such unpredictable weather. "The forecast is calling for severe thunderstorms," she'd said over breakfast. "Maybe wait until next weekend." But Justin had been planning this specific photographic expedition for months, waiting for the right combination of atmospheric conditions and seasonal lighting. "Desert storms create the most incredible photographic opportunities," he'd explained, showing her examples from his previous storm photography. "The contrast between the darkness of the clouds and the way the light filters through, it's magical. Besides, I know that area like the back of my hand. If things get too dangerous, I'll head back to the truck." Those words would later echo painfully in Lisa's memory. Justin left his apartment at 6:30 a.m., driving his reliable Toyota 4Runner loaded with hiking and photography gear. He'd sent a detailed text to both Lisa and his hiking buddy, Marcus Chen, outlining his planned route, expected waypoints, and anticipated return time of 7 p.m. This level of communication was standard practice for Justin. He'd seen too many preventable tragedies during his search and rescue volunteer work to ever venture into the wilderness without proper safety protocols. The drive to his chosen trailhead took 90 minutes through increasingly dramatic landscape. As Phoenix's suburban sprawl gave way to raw desert, Justin felt the familiar sense of peace that always accompanied his transition from the urban world to the natural one. He'd brought along a thermos of coffee and his favorite playlist of instrumental music, savoring these quiet moments before the physical challenge of the hike began. At the trailhead, Justin performed his usual pre-hike ritual, checking and double-checking his gear, reviewing his planned route on both his GPS device and paper topographic maps, and taking a photo of his truck's odometer and the trailhead marker. He'd learned this habit from an old-timer search and rescue volunteer who'd told him, "The desert doesn't forgive carelessness, son. Document everything. Assume nothing." The morning hike progressed exactly as Justin had hoped. The weather was still clear, with scattered clouds providing interesting photographic opportunities without posing any immediate threat. He captured images of blooming Palo Verde trees, a family of javelinas moving through a wash, and the intricate patterns that wind and water had carved into sandstone formations over millennia. Justin's photography blog followers would later note the timestamp on his final posted images, 11:43 a.m., showing a panoramic view from a ridge overlooking the desert floor. The composition was masterful, capturing the vast scale of the landscape while highlighting the delicate details of desert vegetation in the foreground. It was the kind of image that had earned Justin recognition in several photography competitions and a growing following among nature enthusiasts. But by early afternoon, the atmospheric conditions that had promised such photographic drama began to turn genuinely menacing. Justin, ever the careful observer of weather patterns, noted the rapid drop in barometric pressure, the sudden shift in wind direction, and the ominous darkening of clouds that had been merely picturesque hours earlier. At 2:47 p.m., Justin's phone buzzed with an incoming text from his longtime friend, Marcus Chen. Marcus, a software engineer who shared Justin's love of the outdoors but lacked his expertise in wilderness navigation, often checked in during Justin's solo expeditions. The message was simple. "How's the hike going, man?" Justin's response would haunt everyone who knew him for years to come. The photograph showed an ominous sky. Dark, swirling clouds gathering over the desert landscape like nature's own warning sign. The image captured the raw power of an approaching desert storm, with lightning flickering in the distance and the saguaro cacti standing like silent sentinels against the brewing tempest. The composition was both beautiful and terrifying, showcasing Justin's artistic eye even as it documented the dangerous conditions developing around him. "Storm rolling in fast," Justin had typed beneath the image. "Might have to cut this short." Marcus immediately responded with concern. "That looks intense. Are you heading back to the truck?" But no reply came. Justin's phone showed the message as delivered, but never read. Those would be the last words anyone would hear from Justin Harlow. By 8 p.m. on March 15th, Lisa Rodriguez knew something was terribly wrong. Justin had never been late returning from a hike without calling, and his phone was going straight to voicemail. She drove to the trailhead where Justin had parked his truck, hoping to find him making his way back in the darkness, perhaps delayed by the storm that had indeed swept through the area that afternoon. The parking area was empty except for Justin's Toyota 4Runner, sitting exactly where he'd left it 12 hours earlier. Lisa felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cool desert night air. She immediately called Marcus Chen, who drove out to meet her, and together they contacted the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office. When Justin failed to return by Sunday evening, His absence triggered immediate concern among his close-knit group of hiking friends. This wasn't like him. Justin was meticulous about his plans, always sharing his intended routes and expected return times. He carried emergency beacons and had never, in all his years of desert hiking, simply vanished without a trace. The initial police response was measured. Officers explained that adults had the right to disappear if they chose to, and that desert emergencies often resolved themselves when missing hikers found their way back to civilization. But Lisa's insistence that something was genuinely wrong, combined with Justin's reputation as an experienced and responsible hiker, prompted authorities to begin preliminary search efforts on Sunday morning. Marcus was the first to formally report Justin missing, providing authorities with detailed information about his friend's hiking habits, experience level, and the specific route he'd planned to take. Within hours, a search and rescue operation was mobilized, bringing together professional rescue teams, volunteers, and fellow hikers who knew Justin personally. The response was overwhelming. Word spread quickly through Phoenix's tight-knit hiking community, and volunteers arrived at the staging area in droves. Justin's reputation as a helpful and knowledgeable outdoorsman had earned him friends throughout the desert recreation community, and dozens of people were willing to spend their own time and resources searching for him. Among those volunteers was Nick Taylor, a man who would later become central to this tragic story in ways no one could have imagined. Nick appeared to be exactly what he claimed, a concerned member of the hiking community, eager to help find a missing fellow adventurer. He was knowledgeable about the terrain, physically capable, and seemingly divorced to the search effort. In his mid-30s, with the lean build and weathered complexion of someone who spent considerable time outdoors, Nick fit seamlessly into the group of volunteer searchers. He introduced himself to the search coordinators as a local hiker who'd heard about Justin's disappearance through online hiking forums. He claimed to have extensive experience in the area where Justin had gone missing and volunteered to join the ground search teams that would be systematically combing through the most likely areas where Justin might have sought shelter or encountered difficulties. Nick was out there every single day, recalled Sarah Mitchell, another volunteer searcher. He seemed genuinely worried about Justin, always asking if there were new leads or areas we hadn't checked yet. He even brought his own supplies and never complained about the heat or the long hours. If anything, he seemed more dedicated than some of the other volunteers. Nick's apparent expertise and dedication quickly earned him respect among both professional search coordinators and fellow volunteers. He demonstrated detailed knowledge of desert survival techniques, offered practical suggestions about search strategies, and worked tirelessly in conditions that left other volunteers exhausted and demoralized. During the evening briefings that search coordinators held to review the day's efforts and plan the following day's activities, Nick was often among the most vocal participants. He asked detailed questions about areas that had been searched, suggested alternative theories about Justin's possible routes, and volunteered for the most challenging and remote search assignments. He had this theory that Justin might have tried to take shelter in some of the more remote cave systems, remembered David Chen, a professional search and rescue coordinator who led many of the organized efforts. Nick seemed to know about geological formations that weren't on our standard maps. He volunteered to check these areas himself, said he'd done some cave exploring in the region, and knew how to navigate safely underground. The search continued for 3 weeks, covering hundreds of square miles of unforgiving desert terrain. Helicopters equipped with thermal imaging cameras swept overhead, while ground teams methodically worked through grids, checking every wash, every cave, every possible location where a hiker might have sought shelter or met with misfortune. Volunteers endured brutal conditions as March temperatures soared into the high 90s during midday hours, then plummeted into the 40s at night. The desert that Justin had loved for its beauty and solitude revealed its harsh, unforgiving nature to those who ventured out to search for him. Many volunteers suffered from heat exhaustion, dehydration, and minor injuries from falls on treacherous terrain. But through it all, Nick Taylor remained a constant presence. He seemed immune to the physical hardships that wore down other searchers, always ready to volunteer for additional assignments when others needed rest. His dedication impressed everyone involved in the search effort. I remember thinking at the time that Nick was the kind of person you'd want searching for you if you were lost out there, Sarah Mitchell reflected years later. He never gave up, never showed frustration, never complained about the conditions. Looking back now, knowing what we know, it's absolutely chilling. But the Sonoran Desert had swallowed Justin Harlow completely. As days turned into weeks, hope began to fade. Desert survival experts explained the harsh reality. Even experienced hikers could succumb quickly to the elements if caught unprepared in a storm. Dehydration, hypothermia from the dramatic temperature drops that follow desert storms, or simple disorientation could prove fatal within hours. The storm that had been photographed in Justin's final message had indeed been severe. Weather stations recorded wind gusts exceeding 60 miles per hour, lightning strikes, and flash flooding in several washes throughout the search area. Search coordinators acknowledged that if Justin had been caught in the open during the storm's peak intensity, his chances of survival would have been minimal regardless of his experience level. Eventually, the active search was scaled back, though it was never officially called off. Justin's case joined the sobering statistics of hikers who vanish in America's wilderness areas, missing but not forgotten. Their families left to wonder forever what fate befell their loved ones in the vast, indifferent landscape. Nick Taylor was among the last volunteers to accept this reality. Even as professional search teams were reassigned to other cases and most volunteers returned to their regular lives, Nick continued to venture into the desert on weekends, claiming he was still looking for any trace of Justin Harlow. He told me he felt responsible, remembered Lisa Rodriguez. He said that as long as there was any chance Justin was still alive out there, he couldn't give up. At the time, I thought it showed incredible compassion and dedication. Now I realize it was something else entirely. 3 years, 4 months, and 12 days after Justin Harlow sent that final photograph, a group of graduate students from Arizona State University were conducting a botanical survey in a remote section of the Sonoran Desert, approximately 15 miles from where Justin's car had been found abandoned. Dr. Elena Rodriguez was leading her students through an area rarely visited by casual hikers, a harsh landscape of chalas, barrel cacti, and towering saguaros that had stood sentinel in the desert for over a century. The research team was part of a long-term study documenting the effects of climate change on desert ecosystems, cataloging shifts in plant populations, and documenting species adaptation strategies. The students were documenting rare plant species when one of them, Maria Santos, noticed something unusual near the base of a massive saguaro cactus that stood nearly 40 feet tall and appeared to be well over a century old. The ancient plant was located in a natural amphitheater formed by weathered rock formations, creating a hidden alcove that was invisible from most angles of approach. "Professor, there's something weird over here," Maria called out, her voice carrying a note of uncertainty that made Dr. Rodriguez look up from her field notes. What they found defied every assumption about Justin's disappearance and transformed a missing person case into one of the most disturbing homicides in Arizona's recent history. Human skeletal remains sat propped against the ancient cactus, but these weren't the bones of someone who had died from exposure or accident. Heavy wire, the kind used for livestock fencing, had been used to secure the skeleton to the saguaro, wound around the torso and limbs in a way that spoke of deliberate, methodical restraint. Even more chilling was the positioning. The remains faced east, toward the sunrise, as if someone had arranged them to watch the dawn break over the desert horizon for eternity. A tattered backpack nearby contained items that would later be identified as belonging to Justin Harlow: his camera equipment, water bottles, and identification. But the scene contained additional disturbing elements that suggested this hadn't been a quick or merciful death. Scattered around the base of the cactus were personal items that appeared to have been deliberately arranged. Justin's hiking boots placed neatly side by side, his hat hung on a lower branch of the saguaro, his walking stick propped against a nearby rock as if he might return to collect it at any moment. Dr. Rodriguez, who had witnessed her share of desert tragedies during her years of field research, immediately recognized that this was far beyond anything natural or accidental. The deliberate arrangement of the scene, the wire restraints, the positioning of personal effects, everything indicated human involvement of the most sinister kind. "I've seen what the desert does to people who die from exposure or dehydration," Dr. Rodriguez later testified. "Animals scatter remains, flash floods move bones, the elements break down materials naturally. This was completely different. Someone had created this scene with specific intent, and they'd taken time to arrange it in a way that would have maximum psychological impact when discovered." Dr. Rodriguez immediately recognized the gravity of the discovery and ordered her students to retreat while she called authorities. She used her satellite communicator to contact the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office, carefully documenting the GPS coordinates and providing detailed descriptions of what they'd found. Within hours, the remote desert location was transformed into a crime scene. Helicopter units airlifted forensic teams to the site, while ground personnel established a perimeter and began the complex process of preserving evidence in the challenging desert environment. The logistics of processing a crime scene in such a remote location presented unprecedented challenges. Equipment and personnel had to be transported across miles of rough terrain, with all evidence carefully protected from wind, sand, and the extreme temperature fluctuations that could compromise forensic analysis. Detective Amanda Foster, a veteran investigator with the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office who specialized in complex homicide cases, was assigned to lead the investigation. Foster had 23 years of experience in law enforcement, but she later admitted that the desert crime scene was unlike anything she'd encountered. The remote location, the condition of the remains, the obvious torture elements, it was clear from the beginning that we were dealing with someone who had both extensive knowledge of the desert and a deeply disturbed psychological profile, Detective Foster explained. This wasn't a crime of passion or opportunity. It was planned, executed with precision, and designed to inflict maximum suffering. The Maricopa County Medical Examiner's Office worked meticulously to process the remains. Despite 3 years of exposure to the harsh desert elements, enough evidence remained to paint a horrifying picture of Justin's final hours. Forensic analysis revealed multiple fractures consistent with torture, bones broken in ways that suggested prolonged suffering rather than accidental trauma. The pattern of injuries indicated that Justin had been systematically beaten over an extended period, with breaks to bones in his hands, arms, and ribs that could only have resulted from deliberate violence. Even more disturbing was evidence suggesting that Justin had been kept alive for a considerable time while restrained. Wear patterns on the wire restraints indicated prolonged struggling, and the positioning of the remains suggested that Justin had been conscious and aware during at least part of his ordeal. The wire binding showed signs of rust and weathering that confirmed the remains had been in place for an extended period, likely since shortly after Justin's disappearance. Forensic botanists were able to analyze plant growth patterns around the site to further confirm the timeline, noting how desert vegetation had grown around and through the wire restraints over the intervening years. Most disturbing of all was the discovery of Justin's hiking boots, still laced and positioned near the base of the cactus, as if his killer had wanted to ensure the scene would be unmistakably identified as Justin Harlow when eventually discovered. The boots contained small rocks and sand, suggesting they had been removed from Justin's feet and placed deliberately rather than falling naturally. Crime scene photographers documented every aspect of the macabre tableau, creating a comprehensive record that would be studied and analyzed for months to come. The images, too disturbing to be released to the public, showed the full extent of the killer's psychological disturbance and methodical approach to torture and murder. Additional evidence collected at the scene included fragments of rope, suggesting that Justin had initially been restrained with more conventional materials before being secured with the heavy wire. Forensic analysis of these rope fragments would later provide crucial DNA evidence that would help identify his killer. But perhaps most chilling was a small pile of stones arranged near the body in a pattern that appeared deliberate and meaningful to the killer, though its significance would never be fully understood. The arrangement suggested ritual or symbolic importance, indicating that Justin's murder had been more than simple violence. It had been a carefully orchestrated act of psychological sadism. When Justin Harlow's death was confirmed as murder, Detective Amanda Foster's team re-examined every detail, including background checks on all search volunteers. That's when Nick Taylor's dark history surfaced. Records revealed Nick had been convicted in 2018 for kidnapping and torturing a solo hiker in New Mexico. The victim escaped, but the MO matched Justin's case, suggesting Nick had refined his methods. By the time police tried to question him, Nick had vanished, fleeing days before Justin's remains were identified. Further digging exposed a pattern of deception, fake identities, outdoor jobs that gave him access to remote areas, and cash-only travel across the Southwest. Investigators found eerie links to other unsolved hiker disappearances, but with Nick gone, the full scope of his crimes may never be known. The evidence painted a chilling picture: a calculated predator who hunted in the wilderness he knew best, leaving behind a trail of terror that only came to light too late. 6 weeks after Justin Harlow's remains were found, Utah police discovered Nick Taylor's body in a remote desert cabin near Moab. He had died by suicide, a gunshot to the head, with a cryptic note reading only, "I'm sorry." Inside the cabin, investigators uncovered a horrifying shrine to his crimes. Photos, maps, and journals revealed Nick had not only murdered Justin, but likely other hikers across the Southwest. Most damning was a photo Nick took, nearly identical to Justin's last text, proving he had stalked and ambushed him. His journals gloated about joining the search for Justin, writing with perverse satisfaction about fooling volunteers. "If only they knew I was the only one who could tell them where to find him," one entry read. Hidden beneath the floorboards were trophies, belongings from other missing hikers, suggesting Nick was a serial killer who hunted solo backpackers for years. His meticulous files contained victim research, hiking routes, social media posts, and secret photos taken from afar. This wasn't just murder, it was predation, said forensic psychologist Dr. Michael Harrison. Nick's knowledge of the wilderness, once admired by fellow rescuers, was honed through stalking victims in the desert's most isolated corners. With his death, many questions remain unanswered, but the evidence left behind paints a portrait of a calculating predator who turned the wilderness he knew so well into a hunting ground. Nick Taylor's death closed the investigation into Justin Harlow's murder, but many questions remain. Despite exhaustive efforts, No clear connection between Justin and Nick was ever found. No shared history, no mutual acquaintances. Justin's family and friends searched his social media, volunteer work, and hiking logs for clues, but found nothing. "The randomness is what haunts us," said Justin's sister, Rebecca. "He was kind, helpful. Why him?" Investigators believe Nick was evolving as a predator, moving from opportunistic attacks to stalking victims through hiking forums and search and rescue operations. Files in his cabin revealed detailed research on dozens of hikers, routes, schedules, even secret photos. But with his suicide, his full motives died with him. The case exposed systemic failures. Despite his violent past, Nick evaded parole monitoring, used fake IDs, and crossed state lines undetected. "Better coordination could have saved lives," admitted Detective Foster. His suicide, likely triggered by fear of exposure, denied families of other potential victims any closure. The betrayal traumatized the hiking community, especially volunteers who had worked alongside Nick. "He played the concerned rescuer while enjoying our pain," said Sarah Mitchell, a fellow volunteer. Search teams now enforce stricter background checks, buddy systems, and psychological screenings. The case also spurred safety reforms. More hikers carry satellite communicators, forums verify members, and clubs emphasize caution without sacrificing community trust. "We lost our innocence," said one hiker. Justin's story remains a chilling reminder. Even in nature's beauty, danger can hide in plain sight. The desert keeps its secrets, and some questions may never be answered. A year after the resolution of Justin Harlow's case, the Sonoran Desert has reclaimed its silence. The crime scene tape is gone, forensic work complete, and nature has begun healing the site where a dark secret was uncovered. The ancient saguaro cactus that marked Justin's final resting place still stands, its arms stretching skyward, while desert wildflowers bloom seasonally around it, a natural, ever-changing memorial. Nearby, a simple marker honors Justin. Beloved son, brother, and friend, the desert was his sanctuary. Hikers who knew him or were moved by his story gather here, leaving flowers and sharing memories. "This desert was Justin's refuge," says Marcus Chen, a friend. "We won't let Nick Taylor's evil define his legacy." The case reshaped the hiking community's approach to safety. Background checks for search volunteers, buddy systems, and better communication protocols are now standard. "We still look out for each other," says Tom Wilson of the Phoenix Hiking Club, "but we're more cautious." Justin's family found painful closure. "At least we can bury him," his mother Rebecca said at his memorial. They established the Justin Harlow Memorial Foundation, funding safety training and research to prevent similar tragedies. "If his death makes the outdoors safer, some good comes from this pain," she said. Law enforcement also adapted, improving interstate coordination to track predators like Taylor. "The case exposed dangerous gaps," admits Detective Foster. Psychologist Dr. Michael Harrison's research on Taylor's methods now aids in detecting predatory behavior in volunteer groups. As sunset paints the desert in colors Justin once photographed, hikers still venture out. Wiser, better equipped, but undeterred. The desert holds beauty and danger, secrets and truths. Justin is remembered not as a victim, but as a lover of its wildness, whose legacy endures in the community's resilience and the foundation that bears his name. The saguaros stand witness, cradling both terrible and beautiful stories. The desert remains what it always was: vast, indifferent, and awe-inspiring, a place of solace and peril beneath the endless Sonoran sky. The story is told, The desert remembers. Life goes on,